Close your eyes and imagine. What if the things in life that cause us the greatest pain, the things that bring us grief, are challenges? Challenges designed to help us grow, to ultimately become what we were always meant to be. We feel like we've been buried, but what if, like a seed, we've been planted? And having been planted, we grow to become a mighty tree. Now, open your eyes. Open your eyes to this way of viewing life. Come with me as we explore your true, infinite, eternal nature. This is Grief to Growth, and I am your host, Brian Smith. Hi there, I'm Brian Smith, and welcome to Grief to Growth. So whether you're a first-time listener or someone's been on this journey with me for a while, I'm truly glad you're here. This is a podcast where we explore the big questions. Who are we? Why are we here? Where do we come from? And where do we go when this life ends? And I want to say this to you. If you're a skeptic, this episode is especially for you. Today, we're taking a close look at one of the most fascinating and controversial topics in the study of consciousness, and that is near-death experiences. But we're not talking about just any NDEs. We're talking about verified near-death experiences, cases where people gained information during clinical death that they couldn't have possibly known through ordinary means. My guest is Simon Bown. He's the author of Verified Near-Death Experiences, Proof of an Afterlife. Simon is a clinical hypnotherapist who's guided hundreds of past life regressions, and he's also the host of a podcast with over 900 episodes exploring NDEs, reincarnation, and consciousness. His new book brings together some of the most rigorously documented NDEs, cases that challenge the materialist idea that the mind ends when the brain stops. We'll explore what it means for an NDE to be verified. We'll hear some of the most compelling cases that Simon has uncovered, and we'll tackle the hard questions that skeptics often raise. Can these experiences really offer proof of life after death, or is it all just brain chemistry and wishful thinking? We'll also look at how these experiences often lead to deep personal transformation, the common themes that show up again and again, and even the more troubling NDEs that don't follow the usual script. So whether you're deeply spiritual, whether you're cautiously curious, or you're firmly skeptical, this is a conversation that will challenge you to look deeper. And when you're done listening, please head over to my Substack at grieftogrowth.substack.com, where you can read an article I'm going to post about this, leave a comment, and join the conversation. So now let's dive in with Simon Bown.
Hi, how you doing? It's good to be here.
It's great to have you here, Simon. I've studied a lot of different afterlife areas, mediumship, after-death communications, etc. NDEs, I think, provide some of the most compelling, I'm going to say, proof that an afterlife exists. So before we get started, I mentioned in the introduction, verified NDE. What is a verified NDE?
Well, the word that we use is veridical, which comes from a Latin word veridicus, meaning truth or to be truthful.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't want to use veridical near-death experiences as my book title because people probably don't know that word so much. But what I've got is about 30 cases in the book where people basically they died and then they saw something while out of body. They come back and talk to people about it and they say to them, yeah, but that happened when you were dead. There's no way you could have seen it. So it's a kind of verification that something spiritual happened, that their consciousness was out of their body and able to see what was going on. So that's basically what it is.
Yeah, I know the word veridical myself, but it is a word I've only ever heard used associated with NDE. So I think verified is a good word to use for your book title. So you said you've got 30 cases in your book. So explain to people like how you found these cases, how you verified them.
Well, I'd say five of them are quite famous cases, which I think are really good.
Hmm.
So I've put them in the book. But the rest of them, every single one of those people has been a guest on my podcast. So I was able to talk to them myself about their whole experience.
Hmm.
And I was writing the book and I did further Zoom calls with everybody. And then when I'd finished the chapter that they're featured in, I'd send it to them so they could read it and confirm that I got everything accurate. So this book has been read by the experiences and confirmed that what I've put is accurate of their
Okay.
experience.
Yeah.
And also, I write about their whole experience, everything spiritual that happens when they go on, say, to the afterlife. They have the life review, they meet deceased loved ones or spirit guides, the areas they might go to. So it's not just about the veridical side of it. There's lots more to the book as well.
Yeah, exactly. I've interviewed probably 100 or so people who have had near-death experiences, and the vertical part of it is really interesting, but there's so much more to it. But so we'll start with the veridical today because I do want to address this episode to the skeptics, the people who say, well, this is all just a dying brain. This is a dump of DMT. This is oxygen deprivation. So this is one thing that easily refutes those theories. So can you give me like one example? Maybe we'll start with the famous one, and then we'll go to one that's not so famous.
Well, there's the famous one of the famous ones is the Pamela Reynolds case that I've got in my book,
Hmm.
where she had an embolism in the back of her brain at the base, and it was large and it was likely to kill her, and it was in a really difficult place to operate. So the doctor, Dr. Spetzler, he had this new technique back in the 90s, which I think is more common today, which he calls standstill. And what they do is they purposefully stop the heart, and so the brain function ceases. And so there's no flow of blood. And then they can operate on this thing in the back of her head, take it out without risk of her bleeding out or other complications.
Hmm.
And so she's hooked up to all these devices. So they can be absolutely sure that there was no brain function, no heartbeat. And yet she was able to describe what happened in the room. And there are criticisms of this. One is that she might have seen something, or that she might have heard something and hallucinated, that there was some form of consciousness in the brain, even though it's been inactive for 10 minutes. It's not just a few seconds.
Hmm.
But for her, they built these special earbuds. This was the 90s, before the earbuds we have now, and
Right.
they were put in her ears, and they were shaped to her ears, so they completely blocked exterior sound, and they played repeating clicks at about 96 decibels, which is really loud. It's like being at a rock concert, and they were going really fast, almost machine gun fast.
Hmm.
The reason they did that is because if the brain was functioning at all, it would show up on the devices, the screens they had, that
Hmm.
there was some kind of auditory processes going on. So this argument she might have heard something and hallucinated is impossible with her ears just completely plugged up.
Hmm.
Also, our eyes were taped shut throughout this through this thing, and it's
Hmm.
almost, if you wanted to do an experiment with a near-death experience, you'd want somebody hooked up to all this stuff to check on it all. But she was able to talk about the music they were playing while the operation was going and the
Hmm.
conversation that happened. And she was very accurate. Like they had to feed a line in through her groin that went right up through her heart. And it was some kind of tube for something. I'm not a surgeon,
Hmm.
but there was a doctor down at her leg, and she said, I can't find a vein big enough. And Dr. Spetzer said, try the other leg. And they know that that occurred when her brain function was zero. And yet she was able to recount that conversation back to them. And the
Yeah.
fact they were listening to Hotel California, and she was a little annoyed with them because there was the line in that you can check out, but you can never leave. And she felt a little offended by that. So Dr. Spetzler says he just can't explain it. And she was accurately described this bone saw that they used on her skull, which actually looks like an electric toothbrush, and it has a little blade at the top that spins.
Mm.
And she would never have seen that before. And when she was taken into the operating theatre, all the surgical stuff was covered with cloths to keep it sterile. So that's a great one. That's quite famous, that one. And then another one in my book was Barbara Bartolome. I don't know if you've talked to her.
I have not.
She she's great. She talks so much, and she had a problem with her spine and they were going to operate on her spine. And the day before, they did a test where they'd inject ink into the spine, and she was on a table with her head here, and then they'd move the table like this slowly, and the ink would go down her spine, and they could see through the x-ray where the leak was in the spinal fluid, so they knew where to operate, and they could see if there's other stuff they hadn't spotted before that needed dealing with. So there were two radiographers, one controlling the bed and looking at the screen, and another one controlling the equipment. The neurosurgeon was there, and the orthopedic surgeon was there, and there was a nurse, and it was a pretty standard procedure.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing was, the surgery was supposed to be 7 a.m. the next morning. So the doctors, the surgeons wouldn't have time to check out the results before it started. So they wanted to be there and watch it. So the guy had his finger on the button on the table. He's checking the equipment. He presses the button and the table goes the wrong direction. And the ink goes into her brain, basically kills her.
Mm-hmm.
So she's above the table and she's looking down on it. And it's that kind of classic NDE thing, how she watched all they did with the resuscitation and the very specific stuff of it about the
Mm-hmm.
nurse getting on the phone and calling for a crash cart, and about how they hooked up these things to her chest, and it was the heart monitor and it was flatlined, so they knew her heart was flatlined. The two radiologists were doing CPR, taking it in turns to change between doing the chest compressions and the help with the breathing.
Mm-hmm.
And she said what happened was the neurosurgeon came over and pushed them out the way, and he hit her on the chest with his fist. And she said the fist came from back here. He really smacked her with it. And the second time he hit her, she got a heartbeat, and she said that's when she went back into her body.
Hmm.
So she was resuscitated, and they put an oxygen mask on. And eventually, after 20 minutes, they took it off, and she was like, "What just happened?" And they're like, "What just happened?" She says, "I saw you do this, and you did that, and you said this." And she recounted all of it. And they
Mm-hmm.
knew she was dead when it happened.
Yeah.
And the neurosurgeon stood next to the table, and she said he had his teeth clenched and his fists clenched. And he said, "I'm not going to stand here and listen to this." And he stormed out the room. But then the orthopedic surgeon sat down with her and said, "Tell us again, what happened?" And she couldn't get anybody to talk about it from the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason is that they'd made the mistake. It was her fault she was dead, so they were liable. She could sue them. So
Right.
no one was going to confirm anything to her.
Hmm.
So, I did try and see if we could talk to the orthopedic surgeon because she's still in touch with him, but he declined being interviewed. So that's a great case. There is that skepticism that might say again, there was some consciousness, she hallucinated it or she heard it, but her heart had stopped beating. And I interviewed Dr. Eben Alexander.
Mm-hmm.
He told me that within, say, 20 seconds of your heart stopping beating, you have no brain activity.
Right.
So you can be pretty sure there was nothing there.
It's really interesting, Simon, how the materialists will keep chasing different theories to hold on to that materialism, right? Because they tell us the consciousness is in the brain, and that's all. The brain generates the mind. That's it. Once your brain stops, it's lights out. But then on the I know and neurosur people like Dr. Eben Alexander's neurologists tell us once the blood flow stops to the brain, you've got a few seconds, and then there's no brain activity. So we know there's no brain activity, there's no heart activity, and it's a but yeah maybe, but there's some element of consciousness. But Pam Reynolds' case proves that her ears and her eyes were not functioning. So even if there is some element of consciousness that way, and I haven't read your book unfortunately, but are there any cases of like remote things where people could not possibly know because they weren't even in the room?
Oh yeah, yeah. There's a few of those. There's my favorite is this guy called Tibor Putnoki, a Hungarian man. Have you ever heard of him?
Mm-mm. I'm
This
not.
is a great case. There's Dr. Penny Sartori talked to him. I didn't get to talk to him, but I saw interviews with him and all sorts of things. And
Hmm.
this was the early 90s. He was in Hungary just after Hungary left the Soviet Union. He was in hospital for very high blood pressure. The doctors told him they were really worried about him, but being this post-Soviet hospital, it wasn't great.
Mm-hmm.
And there were three beds in his ward, and there was a big window that was a two-way mirror. So people in the room could see in the ward, but you couldn't see in that room from the ward. So he's lying in bed, feeling awful, and then the next moment he's standing up in the ward and he feels great. And he's like, "Oh, this is great! They've cured me. I feel fine." And I was like, "Why are those nurses rushing past me?" And they were rushing over to his body to give him CPR and try and resuscitate to him. He didn't realize he was dead.
Hmm.
And he looked at this two-way mirror and he just said, "I just thought to myself, what's happening in there?" And then instantly he's in there. And there's a nurse with a trolley at a cupboard, and she's pulling all these things out and putting them on the trolley fast as she can. And she dropped something and it rolled underneath the cupboard. And then she ignored that and rushed out. I think she was going to help with the resuscitation.
Mm-hmm.
So Tibor wondered, what is that thing under the cupboard? And he said it was like his sight was suddenly 4 inches away from this item. And I've heard this before with other near-death experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And he read the label on it, and there was a nurse in that room having a phone call with her husband, and their children were ill, and she was trying to tell him where the doctor's phone number was in the phone book, because we didn't have cell phones in those days. You wrote down your own phone book, and he couldn't find it. And Tybalt could hear both ends of the conversation.
Mm.
And then he wondered about that man. And he said suddenly he was in the apartment with that guy. And it's 7 kilometers from the hospital. And instantly he's there. And he looked around the room and saw the books and the furniture, the carpet. He looked over the guy's shoulder and he saw the doctor's number. And the guy kept flipping the pages. And Tybalt said he was shouting, "There's the number, there's the number." But he also saw this man's socks, and had lots of little pictures of animals on them.
Mm.
And Tybor says he thought to himself, "What kind of a man wears socks like this?" So anyway, he went on to have all sorts of stuff with the life review, and it was really such an impact on him, that side of it. And I describe all that in the book.
Mm-hmm.
But afterwards, he was resuscitated, and the doctor sat next to him and said, "Okay, you were dead for 9 minutes. Did anything happen?" So he talked about the nurse's room. The doctor went in, found this item under the cupboard just as Tybor had described it. And then he found the nurse that was on the phone. She confirmed that the content of the phone call was exactly as Tybor described it.
Mm-hmm.
So he got in the car with her and went to the apartment. And again, he saw this is exactly as described. And when he returned to the hospital, he was holding those socks with the little animals on them. So I think that's a great one. That something happened 7 kilometers from the hospital, and he accurately described all of it.
Yes.
And they know that at the time the phone call happened, they were trying to resuscitate him, that he was going through CPR. So how could he possibly have known about that apartment, that phone call, that item under the cupboard?
Yeah, and I love that case because it proves that not only does consciousness survive death, but it's also that it's not just local. Because there you could say, well, if someone knows something is going on in the room, that maybe somehow they heard it or they're, something like that. But this is like consciousness describing something that's going on remotely, which as far as we know, our eyes and ears, aren't equipped to do. So the word proof is I know in science I work with Dr. Gary Schwartz, and they don't like the word proof, right? But it's to me there's a proof beyond a reasonable doubt because there's no theory of consciousness that's materialist that can account for the things that we're talking about.
Yeah. And it's on my book's called Verified Near Death Experiences Proof of an Afterlife.
Hmm.
And I said proof because for me, it's proof. I'm not waiting for a scientist or somebody to allow me to believe it's true. I mean,
Yeah.
I've convinced myself enough as it is. So that word proof can be a bit, I don't know, contentious. Is that
Yeah.
proof for who? Who decides what's real?
Yeah, I love the way that you use the word proof because the other thing scientists will tell you is we don't prove anything. They'll say that philosophers prove things and mathematicians prove things, but science, they don't use the word proof because it's a philosophical thing in the scientific community. But for us normal people, you know, everybody looks at the sky and we all say the sky is blue. I don't need proof that the sky is blue. We all perceive it. And I've spoken to enough NDE experiencers, and you have as well, that it's proof for us. I have a really good friend who was a total atheistic materialist, and she came to me and said, "I don't believe mediumship is real. Give me the best medium that you have, and I will go to her. I will give her a fake name. I will use my friend's credit card, and I want to see what she gets." And this person came back to me and said, "I'm convinced," because her personal experience was, able to quote prove it to her. So proof is you're right. It's something that it is still subjective. How much does it take for us to prove it to ourselves? But I love the fact that you've gathered these things and to me it's like a challenge. Okay, explain this to me. How does this happen in your model of consciousness?
Yeah, for me, I tend to think that the brain is a receiver of consciousness.
Yes.
It's like a radio picking up a radio station. And so somebody might say, yeah, but when somebody has brain damage, they might lose their memories or they might lose this or that. And it's like, yeah, but with a radio, if something goes wrong with it, it might be you can't tune to another station or the sound is awful or you can't change the volume. Different things happen, but doesn't mean that the radio station stops transmitting. And just because your brain's dead, it doesn't stop. I mean, consciousness is no longer there because your brain's just dumbing down your consciousness so it can survive in a 3D world. Because we know our eyes can't see the whole spectrum, our ears can't hear everything, and
Exactly.
it's a thing. I think consciousness is somewhere else, and it's somehow we're receiving it.
That's a model to me, and my background is engineering. So, I look at it like, that's a model to me that makes sense. That the brain is more like a receiver, and it's a filtering receiver. And as you said, we know that our eyes filter. We don't see above a certain light spectrum. We don't see below a certain light spectrum. Our ears filter. We don't hear things above a certain spectrum or below a certain spectrum. Our bodies receive so much input that our brains only present a very small bit of it to us consciously. So we know all these things are being filtered. And the materialist that says, well, the mind is generated by the brain, well, then you've got to, if you're going to use that model, you've got to account for things like we're talking about. And beyond NDEs, things like remote viewing. We know the government knows 100% that remote viewing is real because they've used it. And so we know those things exist.
Yeah, I talked to Russell Targ
Oh,
and
have you?
Courtney
Okay.
Brown,
Yeah.
and Russell Targ was telling me about this guy called Pat Price, who back when they were doing this for the army, he was exceptional. And there was one time they sent two people out, and they got to a location, and they called in to Russell and said, "Right, we're at the location." So he just went to Pat and said, "The location," and he drew out all these things, and they'd gone to a swimming pool where there's outdoor swimming pools, and he had drawn these rectangles and he'd said the sizes of them, and the amount of feet he described is exactly what the swimming pools were, and
Mm-hmm.
he had drawn out the whole plan of this swimming pool location. But he also drew two water towers there which are not there,
Hmm.
and they did some research and they found out decades ago there were water towers there.
Oh, wow.
So he was seeing back in time as well as what's currently there, which is pretty strange. But he was given a target as a test, and it was a small cabin in the woods next to a military base. And he was able to go into a real high ranking officer's room and look through the filing cabinet and see the names on the files.
Oh, wow.
And when he reported that to them, they just freaked out. They said, "This is too much. You'd think this would be great if you had a spy who could do this."
Right.
But Russell Targ said he died soon after in mysterious circumstances, and he
Hmm.
thinks the army couldn't risk him learning all their secrets.
Yeah.
But it shows remote viewing works over and over. And they also remote view places that are far away, don't they? Like Mars or the moon. And they
Yeah.
say they see stuff there. So if the stuff they see on Earth can be confirmed, what does that say for the things they're seeing on Mars? Does that lend to it being real? We're getting off the subject a bit here and then
Well,
near-death experience.
we are and we aren't because to me it's a whole body of evidence. So the near-death experience and particularly the veridical near-death experiences are something that I think we can take to a skeptic and say, this is very concrete. But it also fits the model that you and I have that the brain is a receiver of consciousness and consciousness exists outside of the body, which remote viewing also, let's say, verifies or emphasizes that model, right? Because if our model is true that a consciousness exists outside the brain, then things like remote viewing would be possible, and that is very very well documented that remote viewing happens. So that
Yeah.
again, I think that kind of backs up the NDE as well. So I want to encourage people to get your book and to read the verified near-death experiences, but beyond that physical verification, there's the abilities that people come back with, the personality changes that people have after they've had an NDE.
Yeah, I know. I heard 70% of NDEs divorce when they come back.
Mm,
It
hmm.
may be such a change. If you're quite materialistic, you want your big house, your nice car, your great holidays, you've got a great job and lots of money, and you come back from the near-death experience and all that is gone. You're spiritual. You don't want to chase that anymore. And then your partner saying, "Well, hang on a second. I
Yeah,
like the money. I like the house."
yeah.
So yeah, it's a thing. Also, there's after effects, aren't there? Like that they become more psychic, and they're almost like weird things happen in the house, and you can't wear watches because they won't work, or lights flicker when they're around, and those after effects come back with near-death experiences. And I think the life review is maybe the most powerful part of the near-death
Mm,
experience because
hmm.
that can change people so much if you really think about what that is and what it would mean for you, to go through every second of your life and to feel the hurt that you might have caused other people. And it shows you what you're doing, what sort of person you are. And
Hmm.
I think it's such a shock that people come back, they're much more compassionate and much more empathy, and they're much more like less materialistic. I talked to somebody the other day who had a great job and they just sold everything and moved into a small apartment. And that's all they want to do now is talk about their near-death experience and show people that spiritual stuff is the path to go down
Hmm.
and that it's all about um, love and looking after the people around you. Because I've heard people say in the life review that they may see stuff where they were kind to people. And it could be the smallest little thing that they just forget about, just like that. But they
Hmm.
say it's like the spirit guides that are with them are so proud of them just for that one little thing that they do. And it's like they're saying, yeah, this is the stuff, this is important, this is how you should behave.
Yeah. Yeah, I think again that to me the vertical part of it is really cool because it's really we can get people's attention with that. But the people that as you said the changes they've had and people don't change based upon hallucinations or dreams. We've all had dreams. None of us has ever had well, I shouldn't say none of us, but very few of us ever had a dream and woke up and said, I'm going to sell everything and move to the
Mm.
desert because of a dream I had. Or people that have uh, had experiences where they've died in the hospital and been resuscitated. Not all of them report near-death experiences, and not all of them change their lives. But some of the ones that do, and I interviewed a guy just yesterday, and it'll be out in a few weeks. He's a really extreme example. This guy was a C-level executive, CEO of a company, total materialist, totally chasing motorcycles and boats and cars and experiences and going out to eat and just living a hedonistic lifestyle. And said, if there is a God, I'll worry about it when I get there. I'm not even thinking about this. And this guy had an NDE. He woke up the next day when he came back into his body, goes into work and says, "I quit. I'm not a C-level executive anymore." And he told me, he said, I won't trade anything for money anymore." He said, I can't do it. He does. He's got all the clairs now, so he's a medium. He's a psychic, and he will work with people, but for donations. But he said, I don't. Money is nothing to me at this point. That is a massive change. It doesn't happen because of a hallucination.
Yeah, yeah, and also the life reviews seem to happen in such different ways for different people.
Mm-hmm.
It's that thing where the near-death experience can be, it's like it's tailored perfectly for that person. And some people get distressing near-death experiences, and others they're kind
Yeah,
of neutral. And I wonder if the spirit guides or whoever's in control of this is looking down, seeing this person and thinking, man, we need to have a talk with them. These things aren't going right. And so this near-death experience happens, and they think, what is the perfect thing for this person? And so they construct it. It's almost like the theater of the near-death experience,
yeah.
almost like it's not the afterlife, it's a space outside of that, somewhere else, maybe for some of
Mm-hmm.
them. And I talked to this woman, Nancy Rhines, in her near-death experience.
Mm-hmm.
She was in this incredible landscape with mountains and forests, and she was walking through this field with a woman she said was one of her spirit team. And she looked behind her, and the whole landscape was just dissolving away into a mist. And the spirit team member said to her, yeah, we created this whole environment just for you right now for this experience.
Mm.
Because that's just what she needed.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that, like I said, the NDE it is so rich, and it is tailored because everybody's is different. I think people get what they want. And you mentioned disturbing NDEs, and I'm sure you've spoken with some people have had some.
Yeah, that Howard Storm. And
Yeah.
there's another lady, I think I don't want to get her name wrong, so I won't say her name. I think that distressing near-death experiences happen more often than it appears.
Mm.
I think people don't want to talk about it when they have those ones. It's almost a thing, I think they have an experience where they go to hell.
Yes.
So you don't want to tell people about it. They look at you and think, you went to hell. What have you done in your life that you're going to
Right.
hell? But it doesn't seem like they're awful people. Like Howard Storm was, I think he described himself to me as an aggressive atheist.
Yes. Yeah.
And he was so changed, wasn't he? He became a pastor later
Yeah,
after his experience.
I've met him. I haven't interviewed him for the podcast, but I've met him because I live in Cincinnati, Ohio, and he's in Northern Kentucky, so we're really close to each other. And he's like the most gentle, nicest guy that you would ever meet. And this experience happened, I don't know, 40 or 50 years ago. It's quite a while ago. But he does. He says I was an aggressive atheist. But I have interviewed Dr. Rajiv Party. I don't know if you've spoken with him, but he was an atheistic materialist, and he had a distressing NDE. And the thing about the distressing NDEs though is people come back and they're always better for it. So and I remember hearing a woman one time. She said, "Oh, I know that hell was. I was falling." And I knew I was going to fall forever. I was in this total blackness. And I remember thinking, I was listening to it, I was like, well, obviously you didn't fall forever because you're here. So it is, I believe it's just theater. It's to get people's attention.
Yeah, yeah. And with Howard Storm and this other lady I talked to, they had a weird way of getting out of the distressing part of it.
Right, right.
Because Howard Storm started saying the Lord's Prayer
Hmm.
when he was in this really nasty place. But he said to me, because he's an atheist, he didn't know any prayers. He
Yeah,
just heard this message telling him to pray, and he started quoting a TV commercial, then doing Shakespeare, and then suddenly he remembered the Lord's Prayer. But with this other woman, she was in this kind of snowscape. The snow was 2 or 3 feet deep, and she was trudging along with these other people, and these demons were there.
hmm,
And they went into this house, and it was, so horrible. It's like hell. There's demons, and they were really nasty. And she said to one of the demons, "Why are you being so nasty?" And he said, "It's Christmas Day on Earth. We're always nastier when it's Christmas Day."
hmm.
And she started singing a Christmas carol. And the demons got really angry, was shouting at her, but he noticed he was backing off. And as she carried on singing the Christmas carol over and over, and then suddenly she was lifted out of that space into the light.
Right.
So I've always remembered that Howard Storm said a prayer, she sang a Christmas carol. If I ever have a distressing experience, I know what to do.
Yeah, it seems to me for my studies of it, it's like as soon as you realize it's kind of like when you're having a nightmare and you realize, oh, this is a nightmare, I can control it, and you just will yourself out of it. Or in these cases, a lot of times people will ask for help, and then when they ask for help, then they're taken out of it.
Yeah, yeah. And I talked to somebody who'd written a book about distressing near-death experiences. Sorry, I can't give you their name. I've done so many episodes,
Yeah, I
and I
understand.
think they said that not one of the people they talked to didn't escape to the light. They all
Hmm.
got out of the distressing place.
Exactly, and they've all left a distressing place while they were still in the near-death experience. So they've always, yeah, that's been, and I've actually sought out people that have had distressing experiences, and I've found that to be the case in everyone that I've looked at or talked to. So there is this element, and I interviewed PMH Atwater, and she's talked to I don't know hundreds of thousands of people have NDEs probably, and I remember she said she was giving a lecture. I think she said one time and one person stood up and said they had a heavenly near-death experience and said it was the worst thing that ever happened to them because they came back, they felt like they were rejected from heaven, they felt like an outcast. A lot of stuff that some NDEs experience, just feeling disoriented being back in this world. And then another person stood up and had a hellish experience and said it was the best thing that ever happened to them because it showed them that they were on the wrong path, and now they were determined to live a different life.
Yeah, yeah, and there's a thing with coma, particularly over COVID. This was found. Lots of people were put into coma, induced,
Hmm.
and they came out afterwards talking about these terrible experiences they had. They also talked about near-death experiences. Well, there's one of the guys in my book uh, was through that, and also there's some people who talk about living another life on another Earth.
Hmm.
And they say it's just as real as this life right here, right now, except this other Earth is slightly different. And it might be slightly more advanced technology, and it's like the McDonald's sign is all a different color to have it. It's just little differences.
Yes.
And I think some of these descriptions I've heard of the coma patients talking about, they say they're nightmares, hyper realistic. But I've heard them talk about them. They sound a bit like distressing near-death experiences to me. And I'm wondering if that's what they're getting.
Yeah, well, again, I think it's kind of like, we get what we're supposed to get when we have the ND. I don't believe they're accidental. So I believe that they happen, again, for a reason. It's kind of maybe a wake up call that we've kind of plugged in and said, if I get to this point and I haven't figured this out yet, um, let's have this wake up call.
Yeah, a kick up the pants, so to speak, a spiritual kick. And it's like I think sometimes like the guides or whoever's looking down and somebody dies, they go, look, he's dead, quick, grab him, let's give him a near-death experience.
Yeah.
But there's other people I talk to who think that the near-death experience was they planned that for their life before they were born,
Hmm.
that that would hit them at some time during their life. And it is so personal. I talked to one lady, she coincidentally was just lives 2 miles from me, and her near-death experience was going back to her grandparents' apartment by the seaside, and
Mm.
it was back as the way it was in the 1970s, and they were the age they were in the 1970s, and it wasn't like she was dreaming; she was there. The grandparents were, oh yeah, we're dead, this is the afterlife, this is where we like to be sometimes, and we brought you here. And they talked about what they do in the afterlife,
Hmm.
and one of them said he greets spirits that of people who've just died, and he greets them and brings them into the afterlife as a kind of like a receptionist,
Yeah.
just saying, yeah, you can relax, everything's all right. But the way he described it was to do with like these white flames coming out of the distance. And as they got closer, you could see the people inside the flames. And some of them were with like their mother or father, or somebody who died before them who'd gone to collect them.
Hmm.
It just gets so rich the more you get into it, and more complicated the more you learn about near-death experiences.
Yeah. So we've talked about, so we've said that they're unique. And for people that aren't familiar with near-death experiences, help people understand what are some of the common themes that we have come across or that you've come across.
Yeah, so we hear about the tunnel of light, don't we? And that a lot of people have some kind of tunnel experience, but it's not everybody. It's not huge percentage of people have a near-death experience. And I've had people describe the tunnel to me as being huge. Other people, I've said it's been tiny. Other people have said to me they've seen other people going up the tunnel or
Hmm.
people going back down the tunnel. And for one guy, his tunnel was an aircraft fuselage. It's like on
Mm.
an aeroplane, all the seats are gone, and you can see the aeroplane going off into the distance.
Oh,
And
wow.
there's all the windows, and there's this incredible light coming through the windows because the interior's got no lighting.
Oh,
And
wow.
there was a girl, she said she was in a tunnel that was made out of transparent bricks, and all the light was coming through the transparent bricks. But the floor of the tunnel was so uneven, she had to crawl to get along the tunnel because it was so bad.
Hmm.
So this idea that perhaps people see a ton of light when they die because it's to do with oxygen deprivation and they're getting tunnel vision and their vision's shutting down, it's just nonsense when it comes to that tunnel.
Hmm.
And I talked to Dr. Bruce Grayson, name dropping here.
Hmm.
He said to me that he's talked to people who've had that tunnel vision experience just before they died, and then they had the tunnel of light
Right.
experience afterwards.
Right.
But we've talked about the life review. That shows up a lot. Not
Hmm.
everybody has the life review. And meeting deceased loved ones and spirit guides, that comes up a lot. There's also the barrier, isn't there?
Yeah.
It can be different for different people. I had one guy describe it to me as like a bubblegum bubble, but
Oh,
somebody
uh-huh.
else, it was a white picket fence, or it just feels like a force field. And whoever's with them says, no, you can't come past it. If you come past this barrier, then you're not getting back. You
Hmm.
can't go back to Earth. And there's a lady in my book who wanted to come back, and the spirit guide with her said, it's too late. Your body's dead. You can't go back.
Hmm.
And she got really annoyed with him. And she was saying, no, I have to go back. He says, basically, he said, it's above my pay grade. I can't make the decision. And she said, well, talk to somebody who can. And she said, he looked up and these beams of light came out of his eyes going up into the sky. And then he came back and said, okay, they've said it's all right. You can go back to your body, but be prepared. It's not going to be good. The first
Hmm.
18 months is going to be really bad. And she
Hmm.
came back down. This is part of her veridical stuff, as she was in the room watching her body have a grand mal seizure. And there was a nurse there and her husband. And she could talk to them about this after the fact, and they could confirm. And the spirit guide was with her and said, this is when you would have died. This would have killed you. But now you're going to continue after this.
Hmm. Wow. Yeah, that's the thing. They are, as I said, they're so rich. There's each one is so interesting, but there are these common themes. But like you said, the tunnel of light is a common theme, but it's not like 75% of people have an NDE have the tunnel. It's actually it's a smaller percentage. So it's the but each person comes back and says, okay, this is what I needed, to continue my journey is the way I see it. So I know you're as a profession, you do past life regressions, right? So how does that tie into your work with interviewing people that have had NDEs?
Well, it's just a thing. My podcast is looking for evidence of an afterlife.
Mm.
So I'll talk to mediums, people who have near-death experiences, shared
Hmm.
death experiences, children with past life memories, people who research that kind of stuff, and people who facilitate past life regressions. And I'm talking to somebody later today, interviewing them about their book. It's all about the psychomantium.
Oh,
Do
yeah.
you know what that is?
Yeah.
And she was involved in a study of how the psychomantium can help with grief.
Yeah. Tell people
And
what the psychomantium is for people that aren't familiar.
yeah, it's Raymond Moody put it together. He heard about something in ancient Greece where
Hmm.
people would be with this highly polished stone that there was a reflection in it, and they'd sit in the dark, and it was said that they could commune with the dead. So he built his own kind of thing, and that was called the necromantium, I think. But he called his one the Psychomantium. So basically, you sit in a chair in a completely dark room with very, very dim light, and you have a big mirror in front of you. But the mirror is angled so you can't see your own reflection.
Hmm.
And you just kind of stay in there in this kind of sensory deprivation room. And then things start springing up on the mirror, colors and shapes. And occasionally people see their deceased loved ones in the mirror.
Hmm.
And I was reading the book today. This woman said she saw Jesus, and she was really disappointed because she wanted to see her father, and it's like, oh man, Jesus shows up.
Yeah.
So that's the psychomantium. It's just that sensory deprivation with this mirror and just
Hmm.
relaxing and opening your mind. It's almost like getting in a meditative state,
Yeah.
that kind of state. And so with near-death experiences as well, there's hints of reincarnation. Some of them I've talked to have said, "Oh yeah, I knew all about my past lives during the near-death experience." And there was one lady I talked to said she could see all these people in the distance in this field during the near-death experience wearing all clothes from different eras. Some looked like from the future, some didn't even look human. And
Hmm.
she realized that these were all her lives, and she could
Wow.
sense a part of her soul in all of them. So, for doing the past life regression, I feel it kind of connects up. Reincarnation connects with near death experiences. And also, of course, the children with past life memories, which can be really powerful evidence. And the
Yes.
mediumship, they can talk about reincarnation. So, it's just one of these different lines of evidence which go to show that there is an afterlife.
Yeah, and reincarnation is really interesting because I was raised in the Christian tradition, and a lot of Christians have been taught to believe that reincarnation is not real, that we as Christians don't believe in it, even though it was part of early Christianity and was actually taken out of the Bible, out of the teachings purposely by the people that wanted to control us and say, no, you only have one life and we control it. But when you start to study this stuff, like you said, mediumship, it comes up with near-death experiences. It comes up just like matter of fact. It's not even a question. So for me, once you start to really get into this, it's kind of hard not to say that there is something to it, whether they're simultaneous or past or whatever. We do live multiple lives.
Oh, yeah. And I've been taken through past life regressions a number of times, and I've had my own little verifications.
Mm.
Like there was, in one of the past life regressions, I saw this location, this park, and it was stood out quite a lot because it was a really sharp angle. It's the last place you put a park if you're a town planner. But 2 years later, I was in a part of North London I'd never been to before, and there was the park, exactly as I'd seen it in the past life regression. And the houses around it were exactly the same as I'd seen.
Hmm.
But I've had one of my clients sent me a picture of an oil painting, a portrait, and said that's who I was in the past life. I tracked this person down. So these things come up with past life regression, these kind of verifications. And there's a detective, Robert Snow, and he did his research in the 90s. He had a past life regression. He thought it was all nonsense, but in the end, he found what he called 28 proofs that that life was real,
Oh wow. Yeah.
that he'd seen, and that's he's got a great book out, and it's with the children with past life memories as well. That can be so much detail, and you really have to research to find out if they're correct or not.
Yeah. Yeah. And there have been, I'm sure you're familiar with the work of Jim Tucker and Ian Stevenson with children with past lives memories, and they've well documented many cases. And I read a book called The Boy Who Knew Too Much. And just that one book, I think that was the boy who says he was Lou Gehrig in a past life. And it's really fascinating again, it might seem like we're jumping all over the place, but there's a common theme here that we are not just a consciousness in these bodies, that our consciousness does survive after we leave here. Our consciousness is not, localized. So those are the messages I think we're trying to get across to people. And there was something else I wanted to go back to on the veridical part of the NDEs, not so much the physical, but have you talked to people who have come back with like abilities that they didn't have before? Like they can play music or they can paint or stuff like that.
Yeah, the David Ditchfield
Yeah,
had
I've
a
talked to him.
yeah, because he came back and he wrote a symphony that was performed, and he does all these paintings, and he
Hmm.
didn't do that beforehand. I think he was played guitar in a punk band for a little while, but and there's other people we hear about who come back and just play the piano, and they hadn't had lessons with it before. So I haven't talked to a lot of people like this, but I know that they're out there and that these things happen.
Hmm.
And it's also it's like the children, a 3-year-old playing the piano like they've been playing for 10 years. Where does that come from?
Yeah.
That's something that might be coming through as well.
Yeah, exactly, and it's really interesting. I listen to all these podcasts. We're trying to explain these things, and again, it's funny to hear the materialists kind of scramble. Like, how do you explain a child that's 3 years old that can play piano like like a prodigy? Well, maybe there's some part of the brain. It's like, so you're saying there's a part of the brain that knows how to play the piano that's locked for the rest of us. How is that? How did that happen? How did that evolve? So it's really interesting that some people do seem to carry over abilities from lifetime to lifetime, or when they leave their bodies and they come back, then suddenly have these abilities that they had no inkling of before, or the ability to predict the future even.
Yeah, and also injuries, as children have birthmarks and birth deformities, which relate exactly to an injury in the past life.
Yeah.
Uh, There was a kid, this is one of Ian Stevenson's cases. He was talking about being a teacher, and the teacher was shot on the way on the way to school to teach. And it turns out this teacher was a bit of a scoundrel, cheating on his wife and doing some dodgy deals with dodgy people, and he was murdered. And this boy had a bullet hole, like a birthmark exactly where the bullet entered, and a birthmark exactly where the bullet left the brain, in exactly the right place. But he knew so much about that guy's life that to say the birthmarks are just a coincidence just seems too much.
Yeah, and it's interesting because in these cases, people might say, well, they had the birthmark, and then it's the other way around. It's like they'll describe a past life, they'll identify the person that had the past life, and then they'll discover the child has, the birthmark. So it's that's another one of the things that's fascinating. So Simon, I'm curious, with your book, have you had any skeptics reach out to you and say, yeah, I'll see maybe even cynics, people who said, I don't believe any of this stuff at all, and they've read your book and said, you know what, I think I might believe this.
I haven't had that, but then I haven't sent it out to people like that. It's almost a thing as I don't engage with real skeptics and materialists. I'm not
Yeah.
interested in their opinion, and my mind's made up, which might be a bad thing because that's what they'll say to me. Don't bother me with the facts. My mind's made up.
Well,
But
yeah, I don't believe it's not our job to convince other people. I 100% agree with you on that. I was just curious about that, but I think it's really funny. Like the guy I interviewed yesterday had the NDE. He was a total materialist before, and I asked him about his relationships. He said, "Well, I've lost all of my friends. 99.9% of my friends are gone because I only hung out with people who believe like me, who would laugh at people like me." Eben Alexander was a total materialist before he had his experience. So for some people, it's got to happen to them for them to be convinced.
yeah, yeah, and that's up to them. It's a thing where I started the podcast because I was learning about all this stuff and I wanted to spread this information more. But I thought more people should hear about all these things and what
Hmm.
they show. But at the same time, you can't be forcing someone to sit down and listen to you. They have their own path to live and they can believe what they want to believe.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And they'll find out someday, right? We'll all find out someday. So I love what you're doing. And as we're wrapping up, I noticed I was saying before we got started that you're also into UFOs. And I know a lot of times I used to, when we had local IANS meetings, I would go to the IANS meetings, and there are a lot of people that understand NDEs are also in the UFOs. So what's the tie-in between the two?
But it's interesting because I've taken people into past lives and I don't control which past life they see,
Right.
and they might go to one in another planet.
Hmm.
So there's some kind of tie in there. Also, there's people who complain to aliens. They say, I'm being abducted. And I say to them, you've got no right to do this. And the aliens reply, but you agreed to this before you were born.
Hmm.
And there's somebody who said that they were like they were in their diaper. They remember being that small and they're in the playpen. These three grey aliens are standing there looking down on him. And he said they had just come to make sure my soul had properly meshed with my body. So, you see all this coming together eventually when you really start getting into it. You find these crossovers and how the aliens have been heard to refer to humans as containers or vessels. And it's like we're interested in your physicality for some reason, which we're not sure what it is.
Hmm.
But it's almost like they don't care about you, the individual, like Simon or Brian. They care about your soul. And so this human life, it's just a temporary thing. Yeah, all right, shut up. We need to do our experiments or whatever. So it does show up as a crossover, and also people who claim to be abducted by aliens have the same after effects as people who have near-death experiences.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah, the becoming psychic, or maybe having some form of poltergeist activity in the house, or
Hmm.
watches won't work on them. So there's something going on there. And even though we've been researching for decades, there's still more to look into. But I'm writing a book about alien abduction at the moment because I'm so fascinated by it.
Yeah, well, I really, it's really cool to talk to someone that understands the breadth of this and how it all ties together, because I do believe it does all tie together to give us a real model of what a human is, what a human being is. I believe that our biology, and then, I look to movies like Avatar. I think does a really good job of showing, the idea that a consciousness can be put into a body. That's I think that's what we are. Our bodies are basically avatars, and we inhabit it for a while, and then we go back to where we came from, and then we inhabit other avatars as well. And our consciousness is not just local. It's just this is the perspective we have while we're connected to this brain.
Yeah. Yeah. You reminded me of something somebody said to me, this lady in her near-death experience. She said in the film Avatar, when they're in the forest at night and everything's glowing, she
Mm-hmm.
said that's the closest thing she's seen to her experience when she was in this field and the plants were alive and the trees were alive and there was all this connection that she said what she saw in Avatar really reminded her of that, all this luminosity.
Mm-hmm.
So that was interesting. And there was something else now, but I've forgotten what it was.
Well,
So
yeah. Again, I was just talking about this. I think it helps us put together a model of what a human being is and what our consciousness is, and it's so much greater than the materialists tell us that it is. So I love your work, and of all the bodies of work, I think if I were going to present one thing to a skeptic, and if they said you can only give me one thing, it would be NDEs, and particularly verified NDEs. So I will definitely be recommending your book to people, and I'm thinking of one person right now who I've known for a very, very long time, who's very, like prove it to me kind of person. And I think this is the kind of thing where people can say, okay, well, yeah, I don't have a way to explain that.
yeah, I hope so. I hope they get it. I've been told that it can be quite an impact, this book. And I'm not saying, hey, I'm great, I'm a great writer. It's these people experiences and talking about the life review and the pain that they had in their lives. One guy told me he had to stop reading and put the book down because it was impacting him so much. And so there's so much to it, learning about near-death experiences. It's not just an academic kind of logical thing you're studying. There's so much emotion there.
It's not. Ken Ring calls it the benign virus because I remember, there's certain things that just open up your eyes, and you look up from the page and you suddenly see the world a whole different way. And I think your book could be one of those things because, as I said, it will change your view of the world when you realize that what I'm seeing with my eyes is not all there is. And I love the fact that we're living in an age where all this stuff is out there. There's a podcast I'm recommending everybody right now, the Telepathy tapes, which is, it's blowing up, which I'm so thrilled about because it's
Yeah.
mainstreaming some of these ideas of consciousness being non-local.
Yeah, Kai Dickens has been a guest on my podcast.
Oh, has she?
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's great to talk to her because that's just amazing what's coming up there. Because it's not just telepathy, is it? They talk about deceased people being around and other
right.
realities and other realms, which is pretty much what shows up in near-death experiences.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And again, people might feel like we're bouncing all over the place, but it's all the same thing. It's all the same thing that consciousness is not local. That consciousness does not, it does not start when you're born. It does not end when your body dies. And all these things are just pieces of that puzzle of what it is. So thank you so much for being here today. Remind people the name of your book, and if people can reach out to you, how can people find you?
Yeah, the book is Verified Near-Death Experiences, Proof of an Afterlife. My website is pastliveshypnosis.co.uk. And my podcasts are Our Paranormal Afterlife and Alien UFO podcast. And I've done over 900 episodes. So you'd probably be able to find it somewhere. I've tried to get it on every podcast app.
Yeah, well, congratulations on 900 episodes. I know what a feat that is. I'm almost half of what you what you've got. So
Uh,
that's great. Simon, thanks for being here today. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Thanks a lot. It's been great.